What's up, Viola Gang? I'm James, and in this episode of Viola Notables, I'm going to be showing you what is considered by many violists as the most difficult work for viola. This is the Bartók Viola Concerto. In this video, I'm going to be explaining why it's so difficult, as well as why it's an incredible musical composition. So let's start right off with the first movements. The piece begins with an eerie, searching melody. The music accelerates little by little. It gains momentum, becoming more and more frantic as if it's a notated panic attack. Until it reaches a peak and then crashes. To me, this opening is the perfect musical representation of anger and frustration. You can already tell how moody and despairing this piece is going to be. That makes sense, as Bartók was literally on his deathbed as he was writing it. But that's just the introduction. Now the piece really starts. The viola restates the opening theme, and then it is taken up by the orchestra. But the viola interjects in a way that brings back that dissatisfied character from the opening. Now the theme goes back in a higher key that makes it sound more yearning than before. The viola soars uncontested over the rest of the orchestra. Until a storm starts brewing. These few lines are extremely difficult due to how they require the violist to leap back and forth between the viola's high register, on top of the notes needing to be exactly in tune due to their chromatic nature. There's another build-up, and then we finally arrive at a C minor chord. When I hear this next part, it brings to mind imagery of spiders spiraling downwards, spinning webs. Again, the anger builds up until the viola ascends almost as high as it can possibly go. The cadenza is another place where the music simmers with rage. You can clearly hear a lower voice and a higher voice. To me, it sounds as if the high voice is running away, and the lower voice is being some kind of a predator. Maybe Bartók is channeling his fear of his looming death, knowing that fate is chasing him. Then the creepy spidery theme comes back in the orchestra, the viola responding with broken ninths and tenths, which demand a huge stretch of the hand. Unlike the last iteration of this section, it ends quietly, the viola line crawling upwards until it fades out. Then, another jump scare happens, leading to what I consider to be the peak of the first movements. That's basically the end of the first movement, but technically it continues in this next transitional section that Bartók called a ritornello. It was supposed to parallel the opening, and just like the opening, it accelerates until the violist is playing probably upwards of 15 notes per second. It ends angrily on an open C string, which the violist, Yuri Bashmet, unashamedly tunes in front of everyone. The second movement is a markedly different mood. To me it seems ethereal and blissful. Since we know that Bartók was dying as he wrote this, maybe this is his glorious imagination of the afterlife. The first half of this movement is some of the most beautiful music ever written, exploiting the entire register of the viola with a full tone and a passionate melody. This gradually builds to a rather violent, chaotic sounding passage with the wind shrieking in the background. Continuing my early theory about this movement being his dream of the afterlife, I interpret this as Bartók's pain pulling him back to reality, where he's suffering from leukemia. The music goes back and forth between these two contrasting moods, as if he's trying to cling to his idealism. Then the theme from the first movement is called back, as the bleakness of reality has finally won him over. After a brief sort of cadenza, the piece arrives at what sounds like a devilish dance. In my opinion, this is where Bartók stopped writing about himself and started writing with his Hungarian heritage in mind. The third movement is sort of like a corrupted, traditional Hungarian dance. It calls for the soloist to perform technical Olympics, such as trilling on short notes within an already fast tempo, and again leaping back and forth between the registers non-stop. We eventually get a break from this with a jovial, more lighthearted kind of melody. But that doesn't last long, as we quickly return to the relentless, chaotic dance. Now in the final stretch, Bartók writes a merciless viola part. It's nearly impossible to perform, but it sounds incredibly awesome. And that is the finale of the Bartók Viola Concerto. But before this video ends, there are two more important details. This piece was commissioned by legendary violist William Primrose. He specifically told Bartók that he should not feel in any way prescribed by the apparent technical limitations of the instrument. Bartók clearly listened to him, and that's why it's as difficult as it is. The notes are somewhat atonal, making it always difficult to play in tune, and there's leaps between register everywhere. As a performer, you really just can't get a break. The second detail has to do with how I mentioned earlier that Bartók was dying when he wrote this piece. He actually died before it was finished, leaving sketches behind for his friend and composer Tibor Surly to piece together. That makes it even more difficult for violists. They have to analyze and try and figure out what Bartók wanted them to play, adding another layer of interpretational difficulty. Overall, this piece is a thrill to listen to. It always leaves me shocked at the raw emotion it conveys. It's a journey into the anger, pain, and heritage of an old man on his deathbed. That's going to be it for this episode of Viola Notables. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please hit that thumbs up button down below and subscribe if you want to see more viola content. Until next time, Viola Gang, Viola King out.